Hello. Okay, so thank you for coming back. Again, this is now my second stream, so I'm pretty excited about it. So I have a bit of an agenda. Also, if you guys pop in, say hi, introduce yourself, maybe, I don't know, just say something so that I know that I'm not talking to myself the entire time. But also, I'm going to go over, since we are reading in this stream, I'll summarize what we read last time. We didn't do a lot of reading because we were doing a little bit of an introduction. I'm going to introduce myself again this time. And also, we watched a anime video cartoon thing. And we talked a little bit about the author. So there was a little bit of other things. We will also be bringing in some additional things. I like to go into my Instagram algo and kind of like pop in a few things that have to do or might have to do with what we're discussing or what we're reading, just to kind of take a break from the reading and just have a little bit of a discussion. So that is what the agenda is for the day. I'm probably only going to do 2 hours again. There's only so much reading you can do, I think. Maybe if later on I develop a little bit of a program, then we can go a little bit longer. And also, I welcome advice since I am just starting off with streaming. If you pop in and you have some advice, right now I'm not using a microphone. I'm just using my computer, my laptop microphone, and my laptop camera, so I know that it's not like top-notch everything. But if you have suggestions on like budget-friendly microphones, I want to give myself at least like 2 weeks doing this so that I know that I'm going to continue to do this before I start investing on additional equipment. But if you have advice, you can just pop it in and I will, take note of it. And possibly later on when I'm ready to purchase, I will purchase one. So yes, so that is the plan for today's stream. So first I'll introduce myself again. My name is Mary Ellis, or Marielis. I am a Dominican American and I lived in Norway now. And basically, I'm a lefty, I'm a progressive. These are values that I've always had and always known. I tend to go very humanistic, so I'm very, very left. But I haven't actually ever really had an education on this stuff. I've just kind of known what my heart and my spirit basically direct me to, but I haven't really read from those that kind of led the way to these alternative systems that can be possibly better than the ones that we currently have today, especially in the U.S. with how capitalism is, causing the divide in the U.S. and how many people don't have their basic needs met in the richest country in the world. That is a failure. So there has to be other systems that can fill the gap if one day, God willing, we're able to change it. Yes, so that is a little bit about me. I do run my own digital marketing business here. So I have a little bit of a flexible schedule. Okay, so let's go into the summary from last stream. So we are reading Neocolonialism by Kwame. What's his last name? Well, Kwame Nkrumah. And we went over a little bit of his biography. We know that he is a Ghanaian man who was educated partially in the US and also in London in the UK. He was the prime minister of the Gold Coast, which was the name of Ghana before, and he was part of the influential group of people that led Ghana, the Gold Coast, into its independence, and then we have the new name Ghana. So he consumed a lot of liberal and socialist and communist literature. He studied philosophy, and he lived in New York City and was part of that group of people that were part of the Civil War, the social justice and civil rights movement in New York. Your stream's dead. Revives. Okay. Remove the space. I don't understand. I don't get it. Again, I am new here, so I'm not exactly sure, all of these different terms, and I don't understand what you just said. So if you can just say it again in a different way, that would be very helpful for me. All right, so I'm going to go back to the summary. All right, so I wrote some notes here about basically we didn't read much in of the first chapter, like I said. So one thing that we learned was that neocolonialism is worse than imperialism. That I found surprising. But when you think about what it actually is, he says that neocolonialism is basically power without responsibility. So when they were doing their imperialistic, colonialistic work, they would still have to justify their movements, the things that happen. They have to come back and report. And there's the paperwork aspect of it. With neocolonialism, you have the power, but then it's like it's not you're running your country. So there's the effect without the responsibility. Make your chat active in Peaky.com. Huh? What the heck does that mean? Let's go to Peaky.com. P. Okay. You know what? Let me research this later. After this chat, because I don't know what that is. I'm gonna have to look that up. Okay. So let's move on. All right. So we talked about the how neocolonialism is worse than colonialism. It's the thing that comes after imperialism, and the reason that it comes after is because there is a point where as soon as the country that is being colonialized or imperialized becomes even just a little bit self-sufficient or a little bit independent, you can no longer impose yourself on them, and therefore it becomes a lot difficult without having to go into war and actually then claim the colony as your own. So therefore, at that point, you have to do more paperwork. And then neocolonialism basically is power through having maybe military forces there to help protect. Many times it's also about imposing your politicians into their government. And then other times it has nothing to do with the actual powerful country. It's usually some powerful people, some wealthy people from the colonial world, which then impose some financial assistance with a lot of strings attached to them, which prevents the development of your country. So that's that's basically why those strings are the reasons why it is worse, because a lot of times those strings don't allow those countries to become independent. They become kind of imprisoned by those strings. Let's see. It's not always beneficial financial. Okay, so it's not always beneficial for the colonial power to have these countries under their thumb financially, but the reason that they do it is because it's power, is destination, is being able to have places where you can place your military bases, so that you can defend against the other superpowers. So that's basically another reason. And let's see. And then finally, it eventually fails. So that is, and it sounds like I just read a whole book, and all we really went over is the first 7 pages. But basically, what it's saying, where we left off, is basically saying that neocolonialism does not have a long life cycle, and that everybody who participates in it, including the colonial powers, know that it's going to end. And it's basically just a game of postponing. And that's the last thing that we went over. So now, instead of going straight to reading, since I just talked quite a bit, the summary, let's go into a video. All right. So a lot of these videos in my algo are that I'm being fed are going to be about this topic. If you guys decide to follow me, which I recommend, if you do decide to follow me and you want to continue to follow and listen to the reading of this book and this chatter, then this is the type of content that you're going to get. So you see a lot of these Instagram clips, but you could always pop in a clip and we can kind of see what you want us to see together. That might have to.
Here are some phrases.
Whoopsie. Okay.
So I think some Ghanaians are angry with me for talking about true Ghanaian history in terms of the origin of the name Ghana, which was bestowed upon the country by the great Kwame Nkrumah, one of the godfathers of Pan-Africanism, who told us that the reason why he did it was because the original Ghana Empire represented African greatness and an empire that he believed Africa would return to. Now, there are many reasons why it is very unlikely that the Akan people are direct descendants of the original Soninke people of the Ghana Empire, the Soninke who ruled the Ghana Empire. Cultural reasons, geographic reasons, linguistic roots reasons, and so forth, which place them much more likely descended from the Congo, Niger parts of Africa. That being said, I can understand why a lot of people who are Akan, who are Ghanaian, want to be descended from a great African empire. I can understand that. And how seeing anybody doubt that, even if the man himself who named the country never said that that was the case. But what I would say is this, guys. It's now time for us to take control of our history and chart the truth. And the truth is going to be very difficult because so much of our history was destroyed, hidden, and misrepresented. But there are some facts and realities of how language and evolution of cultures work. And we have to adhere to those as we try and use the oral tradition that we have, pieces of those, with things that have been written down, with just basic logic and sense and common sense of what is and what is not. Now, I've linked the video below. It's a part of a 3-part series. You can watch the original video if you're on Instagram. If you're not on Instagram and you're watching this on Facebook, it is in my Facebook real feed, so you can check it out there. And just let me know, guys, what you think. But I think it's just unfortunate, the kinds of comments that I've seen. It's very nasty comments, and it's very, very sad.
All right, we don't need to hear what kind of comments he's getting. But yeah, so he's talking about our dear old Kwame Nkrumah, who wrote this amazing book that we're reading. I marked it. So Neocolonialism. Yeah. So he was talking about where the name of the country came from, and apparently Information is not always fun, right? You know, every time we're having to look into the past, where is the yellow mark? Every time we have to look into the past and seeing what our ancestors did, no matter, you know, who they are, where they're from, we're going to see that they did some shit that we probably would think that we wouldn't do, you know? But many times, you know, it might have been the smartest thing to do. Who knows? But yeah, so that's what he's talking about. Did I like it? There you go. Let's watch another video and then we'll get into the reading.
Are all the fucking brown racists mad that white people are the best nation builders when white people choose to see the absolute best in everybody else?
When you say choose to see the best, do you mean like how clearly we see their wealth and their resources and all their yummy stuff? Because yes, historically we do have quite clear vision in that regard. Now, when it comes to nation building, the oldest, like, unbroken surviving civilizations in the world are places like Iran and Egypt and China and Vietnam and India. And, you know, if we're adding points for longevity here, it's definitely...
Yeah, I saw part of this. I don't always see all of the clips that I put here. I just kind of like see their intro, the first like couple of seconds. But this one I actually did. If I liked it, I saw the whole thing. That's kind of how you're going to know if I've already seen it. So actually, I didn't finish this one. So at the end, let's see what happens.
Not mostly the white people places. Now, if we rank the continents in the world by wealth and living standards, we end up with a list much like this, with North America, Australia, New Zealand, and Europe, and all the predominantly white people places at the top of the list. And then Asia, South America, and finally Africa, all the way at the bottom. And when we rank the continents by resource consumption per capita, we end up with the exact same list in the exact same order. The wealthiest people in the world are also the people who are consuming the most resources per capita, which is not surprising, obviously, but here's where it gets a bit sketchy. When we rank the continents by actual wealth and resources, right, who actually owns the most resources, the list kind of flips upside down, with Africa this time all the way at the top, then Asia, then North America, then South America, and then Europe and Oceania, or Australasia, all the way at the bottom. Now, here's the thing about being the wealthiest in terms of money, right? Money doesn't actually have any value. Money is a symbol. It just represents value. The value it represents is of things like commodities, labor, and resources. So undeniably, if white Europeans or Westerners or whatever you want to call it are the best nation builders, they've achieved that by building their nations with other people's bricks. Now, I'm not anti-white people. In fact, I am a white people. Look at me. Glistening in the sun like a chicken drumstick. I am, however, anti-lies, right? And this story about how ethnic Europeans have somehow come to mostly dominate the entire global economic infrastructure whilst simultaneously being morally and ethically superior to everybody else is a lie. In fact, the whole modern concept of race was invented by Europeans specifically to justify their inhumane treatment of people whilst simultaneously pretending to actually believe their so-called Judeo-Christian values. Yes, I've gotten around my blatantly immoral treatment of people by classifying them as technically not people. It's genius. There's no way God is going to see through this, eh?
Why are all the fucking brown racists mad that white people
All right, enough of that.
are the best nation?
Yeah. Okay. Let's get to reading. That's what we came here for. Let's make this a little bit smaller here. Okay. Okay, so we already went through our summary. We already know that it will eventually fail and that the power at B that is mainly a power decision. The system of neocolonialism was therefore instituted, and in the short run, it has served to develop powers admirably. it is in the long run that its consequences are likely to be catastrophic for them. Neocolonialism is based upon the principle of breaking up former large united colonial territories into a number of small, non-viable states which are incapable of independent development and must rely upon the former imperial power for defense and even internal security. Their economic and financial systems are linked, as in colonial days, with those of the former colonial ruler. Okay, so this is basically the same playbook, right, as colonialism, as the the imperialism system. You're basically, dividing and conquering. You're making everybody kind of small, and then you make them have to defend or protect each other from each other, and then you come in to protect. So it's quite genius. At first sight, the scheme would appear to have many advantages for the developed countries of the world. All the profits of neocolonialism can be secured if, in any given area, a reasonable proportion of the states have a neocolonialism system. It is not necessary that they all should have one. Unless small states can combine, they must be compelled to sell their primary products at prices dictated by the developed nations and buy their manufactured goods at the prices fixed by them. So long as neocolonialism can prevent political and economic conditions for optimum development, the developing countries, whether they are under neocolonialist control or not, will be unable to create a large enough market to support industrialization in the same way they will lack the financial strength to force the developed countries to accept their primary products at a fair price. So basically, you're not selling your products at a fair price, so you're undercutting yourself, and then you have to buy what you need, maybe finished products from the actual countries that have control, or basically have control of your financial system, or have some sort of control of your country at their prices, and they can set the prices. So very unfair system there, and hard to get out of. And they said that once they break them up and they make it so that they have such a hard time in developing themselves, it doesn't matter if they all are under the neocolonialist powers. They themselves, because they're so small, or whatever the case may be, they cannot get out of this system on their own. That's why you see now, like there's several countries in Africa that are grouping together. And I think there's even more of them that want to make it so that you only need one passport to travel all of Africa. So these are some of the things that they're doing. I have some videos on some of that stuff as well, but let's keep reading for now. In the neocolonialist territories, since the former colonial power has, in theory, relinquished political control, if the social conditions occasioned by neocolonialism cause a revolt, the local neocolonialist government can be sacrificed and another equally subservient one substituted in its place. Wow. On the other hand, in any continent where neocolonialism exists on a wide scale, the same social pressures which can produce revolts in neocolonial territories, will also affect those states which have refused to accept the system, and therefore neocolonialist nations have a ready-made weapon with which they can threaten their opponents if they appear successful, challenging the system. So, yeah. Okay. Let's continue. These advantages, which seem at first sight so obvious, are, however, on examination, illusory, how do you pronounce that? Illusory, because they fail to take into consideration the facts of the world today. Okay, the introduction of neocolonialism increases the rivalry between the great powers, which was provoked by the old-style colonialism. However, little real power the government of a neocolonialist state may possess. It must have, from the very fact of its nominal independence, a certain area of maneuver. It may not be able to exist without a neocolonialist master, but it may still have the ability to change masters. This is ridiculous. I mean, they can escape one, but they need to have the other if they don't group together. And now I'm seeing why that's so important, what I see that some African countries are doing now. Burkina Faso, I think, is one of them. Mali is one of them, and there's another one. You can type it in if you know it. The ideal neocolonialist state, those are the countries that are being controlled, would be one which was wholly subservient to the neocolonialist interests, but the existence of the socialist nation makes it impossible to enforce the full rigor of the neocolonialist system. The existence of an alternative system is itself a challenge to the neocolonialist regime. Warnings about the dangers of communist subversions are likely to be a two-edged since they bring to the notice of those living under a neocolonialist system the possibility of a change in regime. In fact, neocolonialism is the victim of its own contradictions. In order to make it attractive for those upon whom it is practiced, it must be shown as capable of raising their living standards. But the economic object of neocolonialism is to keep those standards depressed in the interest of developed countries. It is only when this contradiction is understood that the failure of innumerable aid programs, many of them well-intended, can be explained. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I've heard of like these good system of welfare tend to keep these countries under the thumb, per se. In the first place, the rulers of neocolonial states derive their authority to govern not from the will of the people, but from the support which they obtain from their neocolonialist masters. They have, therefore, little interest in developing education, strengthening the bargaining power of their workers employed by expatriate firms, or indeed of taking any step which would challenge the colonial pattern of commerce and industry, which it is the object of neocolonialism to preserve. Aid, therefore, to a neocolonial state, it's merely a revolving credit paid by the neocolonial power, passing through the neocolonial state and returning to the neocolonial master in the form of increased profits. Yeah, okay, that is why it is important for them to have their puppets in the government, because as long as they're getting that money themselves, they can pocket it, and then they don't really have interest to develop the country, especially if they find that there is not really a realistic way for them to lift their countries from these systems. A lot of times there are contracts of how to manage the money that they even make themselves. So, yeah. Secondly, it is in the field of aid that the rivalry of individual developed states first manifests itself. So long as neocolonialism persists, so long will spheres of interest persist. And this makes multilateral aid, which is in fact the only effective form of aid, impossible. Once multilateral aid begins, the neocolonialist masters are faced by the hostility of the vested interests in their own country. Their manufacturers naturally object to any attempt to raise the price of the raw material which they obtained from the neocolonialist territory in question, or to the establishment or to the establishment, there are manufacturing industries which might compete directly or indirectly with their own exports to the territories. Even education is suspect as likely to produce a student movement, and it is, of course, true that in many less developed countries, the students have been in the vanguard of the fight against neocolonialism. Yeah, so to improve the conditions of the neocolonialist states means to make things more uncomfortable for the neocolonialists themselves. So that in itself makes it difficult for them to want to participate in doing something like that. Let's go to a video. Let's take a break from the reading. Let's see. Yeah, let's go to here.
I wish we could decolonize the way we build our African cities. Seems like every African city is trying to build into this ideal that doesn't feel African at all. And I know that architecture is dictated by economic viability, but I don't care. I just care about what I see, and what I see is repetition and lack of African identity in all of these boring buildings. Which one is more interesting to look at? Which one? I'm aware that investors are the ones deciding what the building looks like because it's their money, but it's still sad that we can't have cities that reflect our cultural aesthetic. The only thing that helps me sleep at night is that my house is going to be a modern mud hut. African architects, civil engineers, urbanists, can we really not do better? Especially for pre-approved projects. Can't they deny the project and say, no, make it more African? Give the building some cultural sauce? See you in part 4. You know, one thing I wish we could decolonize? The way we build our African.
All right, so Africa is moving in the direction that maybe our Kwame wanted it to, or is actually wanting to create their own conditions. That's a good thing. Yeah, we're going to leave Mali for later. Let's see.
Today, we are exposing a smuggling operation that ran for 8 months through armed checkpoints and down a river in the dark. The cargo, 350,000 ancient manuscripts from 45 libraries in Timbuktu, Mali. The smugglers, a librarian named Abdel Kadir Haidara, and hundreds of volunteers, many of them teenagers, the sons and nephews of Timbuktu's librarians. Here is what they were protecting. In the 15th and 16th centuries, Timbuktu was one of the great intellectual centers on earth. More than 150 universities, scholars working in astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and law. Centuries of African thought written down, passed through families, generation to generation. In 2012, armed militants seized northern Mali and began burning libraries. Haidara had already begun moving. His volunteers packed manuscripts into metal trunks, loaded them onto mule carts, and ran them through checkpoints in the night. They floated them down the Niger River in
So they're trying to take back what was once theirs. I support that.
boats. When bandits stopped one convoy and demanded everything of value, the couriers handed over their watches, their rings, their bracelets. The manuscripts came through. More than 95% of what Timbuktu held made it to safety. Since then, over 150,000 have been digitized. 40,000 are now publicly viewable online. For generations, a colonial narrative held that Africa had no written tradition, no scholarship, no intellectual history worth speaking of. These manuscripts are the direct physical answer to that claim. They were always here. The world was just not looking. Abdel Kadir Haidara made sure the proof outlasted the story. It's happening quietly, and that's today's report. Expose the good. Stories like this don't usually lead the headlines, but they are shaping the world anyway. What we engage with grows. Attention shapes the feed shapes culture. We'll be back tomorrow with another story that didn't make the front page.
All right. That's some nice news, some good news there. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing, right? That the colonial powers do. They strip us of our history. They tell us a story that it's not true. They make us barbarians and dehumanize, making it easier for them to do their imperial stuff and then at this point do their irresponsible neocolonialist stuff. All right, we will go into the reading again. All right, where were we? Oopsie, where do you go? There you go. In the end, the situation arises that the only type of aid which the neocolonialist masters consider as safe is military aid. Interesting. And that's probably why we have all these mini wars that never end, keep instability, and allows them to continue to raid the resources at close to nothing when it comes to price. Once a neocolonialist territory is brought to such a state of economic chaos, the misery that revolt actually breaks out then. And only then is there no limit to the generosity of the neocolonial overlord, provided, of course, that the funds supplied are utilized exclusively for military purpose. So you can't educate your people, because if you do, educated students tend to want to improve things, tend to want to, detach, tend to see the problem in the system and want to find solutions. And that is not cheap. That's very expensive business. And, our companies are going to get upset, and our population don't want to pay more for products. So blah, 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 blah. We need you to stay fighting each other and keeping things cheap for us. Military aid, in fact, marks the last stage of neocolonialism, and its effect is self-destructive. Sooner or later, the weapons supplied pass into the hands of the opponents of the neocolonialist regime, and the war itself increases the social misery which originally provoked it. Neocolonialism is a milestone around the necks of the developed countries which practice it. Unless they can rid themselves of it, it will drown them. Previously, the developed powers could escape from the contradictions of neocolonialism by substituting for it direct colonialism. Such a solution is no longer possible, and the reasons for it have been well explained by Dr. Owen Lattimore, the United States Far Eastern expert and advisor to Chiang Kai-shek in the immediate post-war period. He wrote, Asia, which was so easily and swiftly subjugated by conquerors in the 18th and 19th centuries, displayed an amazing ability subordinately to resist modern armies equipped with aeroplanes, tanks, motor vehicles, and mobile artillery. Formerly, big territories were conquered in Asia with small forces. Income, first of all, from plunder, then from direct taxes, and lastly from trade, capital investment, and long exploitation covered with incredible speed the expenditure for military operations. This arithmetic represented a great temptation to strong countries. Now they have run up against another arithmetic, and it discourages them. And what is that? The same arithmetic is likely to apply throughout the less developed world. This book is therefore an attempt to examine neocolonialism not only in its African context and its relation to African unity, but in world perspective. Neocolonialism is by no means exclusively an African question. Long before it was practiced on any large scale in Africa. It was an established system in other parts of the world. Nowhere has it proved successful, either in raising living standards or in ultimately benefiting countries which have indulged in it. Marx predicted that the growing gap between the wealth of the possessing classes and the workers it employs would ultimately produce a conflict fatal to capitalism in each individual capitalist state. Okay. This conflict between the rich and the poor has now been transferred onto the international scene, but for proof of what is acknowledged to be happening, it is no longer necessary to consult the classical Marxist writers. The situation is set out with utmost clarity in the leading organs of capitalist opinion. Take, for example, the following extracts from the Wall Street Journal, the newspaper which perhaps best reflects United States capitalist thinking. In its issue of May 12, 1965, under the headline of Poor Nation's Plight, the paper first analyzes which countries are considered industrial and which backward. It explains no rigid method of classification. Nevertheless, it points out a generally used breakdown, however, has recently been maintained by the International Monetary Fund because, in the words of an IMF official, the economic demarcation in the world is getting increasingly apparent. The breakdown, the official says, is based on simple common sense. The IMF's view of the industrial countries are the United States, the United Kingdom, most West European nations, Canada, and Japan, a special category called Other Developed Areas, including such other European lands as Finland, Greece, and Ireland, plus Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. The IMF's less developed categories embraces all the Latin America, and nearly all the Middle East and non-communist Asia and Africa. In other words, the backward countries are those situated in the neocolonial area and the ones that have all of the resources, says Mary Ellis. Let's go ahead and take a break here and watch a video. Let's go with this one. Wait, no, this one.
30th, 2026 is the day America gave Zambia a choice. Surrender your minerals, your data, and your financial future, or watch your people die. 1.3 million lives hang in the balance. A leaked State Department memo confirms that the Trump administration is using HIV funding as a weapon to force Zambia into handing over its copper and cobalt mines. A Zambian data rights activist said it plainly: America is demanding mining concessions, and they've said categorically that if we don't agree on the mines, they will stop HIV funding. He called it what it is: colonialism. Together with the DRC, Zambia holds 58% of the world's cobalt-bearing copper mines, minerals that the United States has designated critical for electric vehicles, power grids, and batteries. The country that America is holding hostage today is the country that the world will depend on tomorrow. America is offering $320 million in health aid for 2026, money that decreases every year until it hits zero. In exchange, American companies get priority access to mines worth billions. They demand 10 years of Zambia's health and genetic data while offering 5 years of funding. That data will be shared with private corporations to develop medicines and vaccines, then sold back to Africa at full price. And here's the part that should make your blood boil. Zambia is required to spend $1 billion of its own money over 5 years for the privilege of handing that data over. Zambia gets nothing from what's taken. Zambia pays full price for what's built from it. If the medicine stops, projections show 565,000 new infections over the next 10 years. 2.8 million children could lose their parents. The clock America set expires today. And this isn't just about Zambia. 71 countries received this agreement, the majority of them in Africa: Nigeria, Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, Mozambique, to name just a few. Behind every one of those deals sits the same network of private Western corporations waiting to collect the minerals, the data, and the profit. The American government is not the doctor, it's the middleman. A nation that surrenders its minerals and its data has surrendered everything. An Africa that can't say no isn't sovereign. It's a resource to be extracted.
Which is the point. It's the point. I mean, she's educating, and she's letting us know what is happening to those that are ignorant to the lies of the colonial powers. But that is the point. The point is to make them have to choose between their people dying or giving basically away their resources, their medical information without receiving anything back, the privacy of their citizens, which is insane, and their resources in general. So that is the point.
Exploited and discarded when there's nothing left. And if you didn't know, now you know.
Okay. I think this guy's going to talk about, let's go back to reading. Okay. After quoting figures to support its argument, the Wall Street Journal comments on this situation. The industrial nations have added nearly 2 billion to their reserves, which now approximate 52 billion. At the same time, the reserves of the less developed group not only have stopped rising, but have declined some 200 million. To analysts such as Britain's Miss Ward, the significance of such statistics is clear. The economic gap is rapidly widening between a white, complacent, highly bourgeois. How do you pronounce that? You guys, I'm going to have to find out. There's just a few words that I just can never pronounce, and I forget that I'm going to be reading live, so a lot of these mispronunciation are going to come to the surface, and I'm going to be embarrassed. Very wealthy, very small North Atlantic elite, and everybody else. And this is not a very comfortable heritage to leave to one's children. It is not a very, for everybody else, of course. Everybody else includes approximately 2/3 of the population of the Earth, spread through about 100 countries. This is no new problem. In the opening paragraph of this book, the war on world poverty, written in 1953, the present British Labour leader, Mr. Harold Wilson, summarizes the major problem of the world as he then saw it. For the vast majority of mankind, the most urgent problem is not war or communism or the cost of living or taxation. It is hunger. Over 1.5 million people, something like 2/3 of the world's population, are living in conditions of acute hunger, defined in terms of identifiable nutritional disease. This hunger is at the same time the effect and the cause of poverty, squalor, and misery in which they live. I mean, I don't know what else to say. This shit is awful, and we need to get out of the system. And as a Westerner, I can see how, like, if things become more expensive, that is, like, not great, But at the same time, like, maybe if our government treats us better and we have better conditions, then maybe we can afford things that are a bit more expensive versus, like, thinking, can I afford my doctor's appointment or my medicine or a new cell phone or whatever the case may be. Its consequences are likewise understood. The correspondent of the Wall Street Journal previously quoted underlines them. Many diplomats and economists view the implications as overwhelmingly and dangerously political. Unless the present decline can be reversed, these analysts fear that the United States and other wealthy industrial powers of the West face the distinct possibility, in the words of British economist Barbara Ward, of a sort of international class war. Yeah, I think we're in it. I don't know what you guys think, but I think we're in it currently. What is lacking are any positive proposals for dealing with the situation. All that the Wall Street Journal's correspondents can do is to point out that the traditional methods recommended for curing the evils are only likely to make the situations worse. It has been argued that the developed nations should effectively assist the poor parts of the world, and that the whole world should be turned into a welfare state. However, there seems little prospect that anything of this sort could be achieved. The so-called aid programs to help backward economies present, according to a rough UN estimate, only 1% of the total income of industrial countries. But when it comes to the prospect of increasing such aid, the mood is one of pessimism. A large school of thought holds that expanded share the wealth schemes are idealistic and impractical. This school contends climate, undeveloped human skills, lack of natural resources, and other factors, not just lack of money, retard economic progress in many of these lands, and that the countries lack personnel with the training or will to use vastly expanded aid effectively. Share the wealth schemes, according to this view, would be like pouring money down a bottomless well, weakening the donor nations without effectively curing the ills of the recipients. Yeah, one thing that I was thinking, I don't know what you guys think, but a thought is that, obviously the education system is not, or at least some of these contracts with these neocolonialist powers prevent from these countries taking the money from the resources that they sell at incredibly, discounted prices. And they can't really use that except for defending the resource itself, and they can't really use it for infrastructure or for education, for example, housing, that sort of thing. But if these countries do kind of band together and build their own defense system and nationalize some of these resources and manufacture the resources within their own countries, they then can compete in the global market. They can get out of these contracts, whether they like it or not. Like you're a sovereign country. I imagine that there is complexities that I am not aware of, but if I was a leader of one of these countries, I would definitely do whatever it takes to get those companies and neocolonial powers out of my country the best way that I can, join with other countries, and then have people from, maybe descendants of our cultures, maybe African Americans or African Caribbeans or South Americans or whatever the case may be, to come and with the education system, to come and invest in the African system. Individuals, not country, not wealthy investors, but actual individuals come and participate in the country's advising and education and building that way if you don't actually have that labor force already in your country. So you kind of pull from the, especially for Africa, you pull from, this basically from those that we're taking from your country, and then we're able to come have a different heritage because of this transatlantic slave situation that we had quite a bit a few hundred years ago. So that would be an option. I mean, that's something that I would consider. All right, actually I think I had a video that goes into some of that. Was it this one? Passport hierarchy? No. Maybe this one? No, there was one about the clothing. Oh, I didn't bring it. All right, let's see what this one is.
China just switched.
This is talking about China. So let's all right, let's talk about this one.
Collapses every 250 years, and guess how old we are this year? There was a guy who wrote a book. It's called The Fate of Empires. And he has studied the Assyrians, the Persians, British Empire. All empires go through the exact same stages. Stage 1, the age of conquest, lean and hungry and disciplined. And this is where we expand militarily and we have economic superiority. There's no corruption because there's no wealth to corrupt. This happened in the U.S. between 1776 and World War II. America was genuinely the most powerful civilization in human history. Stage 2, age of commerce, both the most powerful and the most prosperous society on earth. This happened in the 1950s and the 1960s. Factory workers could afford houses, cars, vacations, college for their children, and this was all on one salary. And this is where things start to go wrong. Stage 3 is called the age of affluence. This is where wealth creates comfort. Comfort creates comfort.
What the fuck? What happened?
An empire collapses every 250 years, and guess how old we are this year? There was a guy who wrote a book. It's called The Fate of Empires. And he has studied the Assyrians, the Persians, British Empire. All empires go through the exact same stages. Stage 1, the age of conquest, lean and hungry and disciplined. And this is where we expand militarily and we have economic superiority. There's no corruption because there's no wealth to corrupt. This happened in the U.S. between 1776 and World War II. America was genuinely the most powerful civilization in human history. Stage 2, age of commerce, both the most powerful and the most prosperous society on earth. This happened in the 1950s and the 1960s. Factory workers could afford houses, cars, vacations, college for their children, and this was all on one salary. And this is where things start to go wrong. Stage 3 is called the age of affluence. This is where wealth creates comfort. Comfort creates complacency. We've always been dominant, so we'll always be dominant. That's why the men fat, low testosterone, the women doing all masculine shit. That's the hottest country on the planet. After World War II, America kept the war machine going. Wages haven't rose in 50 years. Stage 4 is the age of decadence. First, the military spending becomes completely divorced from military results. The Pentagon has failed their audit 8 years in a row. Second thing in stage 4 is the debt becomes existential. Because we're spending $1 trillion on our interest of our debt. And then the only exits are default and inflation. Both of those destroy the currency. The fourth thing that happens in stage 4 is that the social fabric breaks down from within. Life expectancy declining and minus birth rate. Loneliness epidemic. Drug addiction. 1% not only own more than the bottom 90% combined. Elections offer candidates that nobody really likes. The same money that we're sending over to fight this war in Iran, we could be ending homelessness, especially for veterans. So the things that actually could make us happy and make the society better are the things we are not doing. This is exactly how Rome fell. Why don't people fix these problems? Prisoner's dilemma at civilizational scale. Defense contractors need wars. Banks need dollar dominance. Every decision is rational. The collective result is destruction. At the detriment of society, no empire has ever escaped stage 4. Stage 5 is the collapse. Once the currency falls, 3 things happen at once. You get a currency crisis, you get a loss of allies, and then you get internal political rupture. We're in deep stage.
I mean, like, yes, we're in deep state 5, but I feel like we definitely got the president that was just a human form of like stage 5. And I feel like he like accomplished so many of the things. He probably accomplished some of the things in stage 4, and then he brought us into stage 5, and then now he's just accomplishing. He's just like, number one accomplisher of the stage 5, bullet points to the fucking collapse.
Stage 4 territory. When you have mediocrity in charge, this is what happens. What a time! An empire collapses every 250 years.
Let's get back to reading. Did we like that one? Did we like it?
An empire collapses every 2.
Okay, let's get back to reading. All right. The less developed world will not be developed through the goodwill or generosity of the developed powers. It can only become developed through a struggle against the external forces which have a vested interest in keeping it underdeveloped. So they got to do it themselves. Nobody's going to save you. Nobody's going to save you. Of these forces, neocolonialism is at this stage of history the principal. I propose an analyst neocolonialism first by examining the state of the African continent and showing how neocolonialism at the moment keeps it artificially poor. Next, I propose to show how in practice African unity, which in itself can only be established by the defeat of neocolonialism, could immensely raise African living standards. From this beginning, I propose to examine neocolonialism generally, first historically, and then by a consideration of the great international monopolies whose continued stronghold on the neocolonial sectors of the world ensures the continuation of the system. So first, he proposes doing a analysis, and then he proposes that you unify, and then he proposes that you kick these mother out. All right, we're at the next chapter. Africa's resources. All right, we're focusing on Africa for now. Africa is a paradox which illustrates highlights neocolonialism. Her earth is rich, yet the products, first of all, yes, her, okay? God is probably also a her. Let's just be real. Her earth is rich, yet the products that come from above and below her soil continue to enrich not Africans predominantly, but groups and individuals who operate to Africa's impoverishment. With a roughly estimated population of 280 million, about 8% of the world's population, Africa accounts for only 2% of the world's total production. Yet even the present very inadequate surveys of Africa's natural resources show that continent to have immense untapped wealth. We know the iron reserves are put at twice the size of America's, and 2/3 those of the Soviet Union's, on the basis of an estimated 2 billion metric tons. Africa's calculated coal reserves are considered to be enough to last for 300 years. New petroleum fields are being discovered and brought into productions all over the continent, yet production of primary ores and minerals, considerable as it appears, has touched only the fringes. So there's more to be found. but the continent has to benefit from this stuff. I think the continent has to benefit from this, has to lift their people from poverty. People should not be starving. People should have homes. They should be able to have education, a real education, not this colonial education that we get, an education that actually talks about the African heroes and African history, not American history, European history, or just the sciences and the discoveries of the colonial world, but the stuff that actually came from Africa. And they should have real knowledge that they can then spread through the world, letting people know that their power doesn't just come from whatever they've decided to do once they were able to lift themselves out of poverty, but that their power comes from the historical greatness of their ancestors and the earth that they live. And also, they need to continue their African ways of life. They need to continue their African cultures, like that video that we saw with the lady and the architecture. Yes, this beautiful African architecture. Yes, you make it more modern, obviously, but and with more money, you are able to make things, you can buy better quality material, etc., etc. But also, if you are becoming wealthy, or you're raising yourself from poverty or from a bad situation, and you're becoming more of a manufacturer and that sort of thing, it's also good when you know your own history, know your own culture, and know your own power and your own originality and all of the things that are great about you and the earth where you're living, and the earth that you call mother, that you've called mother for hundreds and hundreds of years, because that influences people to protect the earth. Because as things continue to move forward, like we see with these data centers, there is pollution that comes from that stuff. And the only people that can protect, and the only people that have the motivation to protect their earth, their security, their resources, are those that really cherish the land. And so you have to educate people on why they should cherish land, so that when they become scientists, when they become engineers, that they build things that protect, that build things that enrich, that they build things that, take the poison out of the earth versus putting it in. Actually, I think that that's what the China video was. So let's go ahead and take a break from the reading and go into this video. I think that's what it is. I didn't watch it.
On its first ever green power direct supply project for data centers. In Zhongwei City, a 500 megawatt solar farm is now feeding clean energy directly into one of the country's largest cloud computing parks. 6 of China's top 10 computing companies have already set up operations there, and one firm reports saving $14.6 million a year on electricity alone. When a 1.5 gigawatt wind farm comes online by end of year, the full project will generate 4.3 billion kilowatt hours annually, cutting carbon emissions by 3.65 million tons. This is Beijing's direct answer to the AI power surge: more compute, less carbon, and a new infrastructure blueprint for the intelligence age. China just switched on its first ever...
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. When you know that you love your earth, you love your country, you love your heritage, you love and you want it to continue to be there, and you want to continue to pass it along, when your country is not owned by global billionaires that don't really care about just extracting all of the resources that they can possibly extract from a specific area, or people's, when you have people that actually care, those people tend to protect and to build and innovate in a way that helps enrich and helps use even some of this considered bad stuff and transform it into something that actually is something positive. So that is, yeah. Oh, this is the thing that you guys were talking about? Yeah. To try to help, I guess this is try to get people to view me. Is that what it is? Or is this like artificial viewers? 15 concurrent viewers, live chat engagement, 400 followers delivered. What is this? $10 a month? Is this something people do? I mean, I would like organic followers, organic people viewing me. So I'm not exactly sure how that's going to help, but I'll look into it later. Africa has more than 40% of the world's potential water power, a greater share than any other continent. Yet less than 5, just to interrupt a little bit, 40% of the world's potential water power. And then we have places in the United States that are in droughts because of data centers. It's just a little point that we're trying, because you just see how the capitalistic system works, where it doesn't even help its own people, its own land, and that's disgusting and sad. Yet less than 5% of this volume has been utilized. Even taking into account the vast desert stretches of the Sahara, there is still in Africa more arable and pastured land than exists in either the United States of America or the Soviet Union. There is even more than in Asia. Our forest areas are twice as great as those of the United States. In Africa, that's crazy, right? Because he's saying something that I didn't actually even know, right? I mean, I didn't know that their forest, where is it? There's even more than Asia, and he's talking about the forests, the pastured land that exists in either United States and America and Soviet. There's even more than Asia. The forest area, that's what I was trying to get, are twice as great as the United States. That is not something I knew. In Africa, because every time we see Africa, we see clay, right? We barely see trees. We see clay, Of course, when we see Africa nowadays, if you're on social media, you can see cities with buildings and normal things. But you also know that these are specific cities, and then if you go to the countryside or to the suburbs or whatever you call the towns outside of the city, then you'll see clay. And I imagine there is a lot of clay, but you don't ever see forest or pastured lands. So, yeah. If Africa's multiple resources were used in her own development, they could place her among the modernized continents of the world. But her resources have been and are still being used for the greater development of overseas interests. Africa provided to Britain in 1957 the following propositions of basic material use in their industries. Let's see what they are. Tin ore and concentrates, 19%. Iron ore, 29%. Manganese, 80%. Damn, whatever that is. Copper, 46%. Bauxite, 47%. Chrome ore, 50%. Asbestos, 66%. Cobalt, 82%. That's all of it. Antimony, 91%. French imports from Africa includes cotton, 32%, iron ore, 36%, zinc ore, 51%, lead, 85%, phosphorus, all of it, apparently. So French is really entangled with Africa. So I can see how, the stuff in, what is it? I think I have some videos here. Mali. Yeah, Mali and Burkina Faso. I can see how that is a problem for the French, because both of those, I believe, are African or were French colonies, and then French neocolonial states, basically. To Germany, Africa provided copper imports 8%, iron ore 10%, lead ore 12%, manganese ore 20%, chrome ore 22%, phosphorite 71%. So basically all of the phosphorus is coming from Africa, it seems. Yet in none of the new African countries is there a single integrated industry based upon any of these resources. Although possessing 53 of the world's most important basic industrial minerals and metals, the African continent tails far behind all others in industrial development, gauged on the production of primary products output in the total economic activity by comparison with the country of most advanced production, the United States of America. The facts can be seen at a glance. Okay, so in 1958, 1959, you have Algeria, Congo, Kenya, Morocco, Nigeria, Rhodesia, and Nyasaland, Tanganyika, Republic of South Africa, and USA. And then you have the different industries. You have mining, construction, commerce, and you see the percentages of those industries. I think I'm reading that right. Let's see, what is this? Agriculture, forestry, fishing. Well, there's only 4% for that, and then you have 63 in Nigeria. Yeah, I'm not exactly understanding what was he saying there. Although possessing 53 of the world's most important basic industrial minerals and metals, the African continent tails far behind all others in industrial development, caused the production of primary products output in the total economic activity by comparison with countries of most advanced production in the United States of America. The fact can be seen in a glance. I don't understand really, to be honest with you, what I'm looking at. So if somebody's there, you can explain what I'm looking at. If not, we'll just move on. It will be noted that the America agriculture, forestry, and fishing provided a mere 4% of the total national activity, and mining, or a trifling 1%. On the other land, industry, manufacturing, commerce provide 47%. In the African countries included in the table, which are, with the exception of Nigeria, those with the highest settler communities and therefore the most exploited, agriculture is predominant. Industry, manufacture, and commerce lag far behind. Even in the case of South Africa, the most highly industrial sector of the African continent, the contribution of agriculture, 12%, and mining, 13%, are equal to those of industry, manufacture, and construction put together. Okay. Yeah, okay. However, on the whole, mining has proved a most profitable venture for foreign capital investment in Africa. Its benefits for Africans have by no means been on an equal scale. Mining production in a number of African countries has a value of less than $2 per head of population. As Europe, France, Outremer puts it, it is quite certain that a mining production of $1 or $2 per inhabitant cannot appreciably affect a country's standard of living. Affirming correctly that in the zones of exploitation, the mining industry introduces a higher standard of living. The journal, if forced to the conclusion that mining exploitations are, however, relatively privileged, isolated islands in a very poor total economy. Okay, yes, but I still don't understand this graph, to be completely honest. Still don't get it. The mining, okay, so Rhodesia and Nyasaland have 14% mining. Republic of South Africa has 13. We have 1 and 1 and 1 for Nigeria, Kenya, and the United States. 16% in Congo, and we see like the poorest people doing that. The agriculture, forestry, and fishing is pretty high for most of the countries, except for, okay, I'm starting to understand. Yes, I'm starting to understand. Industry and manufacture. So now we're looking at industry, and then you have the United States with 30, and then Morocco is okay. I mean, still kind of low. Okay, I'm understanding now. Nigeria has a healthy construction. Is that what that is? Okay. Okay. So let's watch another video and take a break. Wait, where did we take a break so I can make sure? Yeah, okay, right here.
Smell le rat from the Elysee in Mali today. Now, of course, we already know from multiple places that Al-Qaeda and ISIS, whoever formed them, and I'll come to that in a minute, are working for the Western countries that claim to fear and loathe them as much as it's possible to do. We know.
So then here we have, we're going a little bit backwards to the mini wars that are started to keep instability and allow the resources to be sold at a low price, because countries cannot create cooperations in Africa if they are under attack, if they're in war. And then you have these the Western countries that are paying off these militias that have done damage to their own citizens, but I imagine they probably have had some reasons. And then they become mercenaries, and then they go and do their biddings. I think that's what this guy's talking about.
That the French people suffered mightily at the hands of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So did the Belgians, so did the British, so did the Germans at Christmas market after Christmas market. But that didn't stop all of those governments covertly assisting ISIS and Al-Qaeda to power, amongst other places, in Syria. And then recognizing the ISIS-Al-Qaeda government.
Then they become friends, because this guy is the leader of ISIS. And this is Macron, the Prime Minister of France. So, yeah.
In Syria. And then welcoming, even though he wouldn't shake Anna Baerbock's hand. Well, if you knew where she'd been, you might not shake her hand either. But Anna Baerbock and the rest of the German government were absolutely delighted to welcome the ISIS Al-Qaeda chief, the so-called Al-Jolani, Ashara, and call him Mr. President. Even though I have seen him holding up severed heads with my own eyes. So the ambivalence, is that a French word? The ambivalence of Western governments towards ISIS and Al-Qaeda is well charted. So I'm going to make an allegation here. I'm blaming you, Macron. I'm saying you, Macron, were behind the ISIS Al-Qaeda supergrowth, which has led to them being able to infiltrate thousands of soldiers to try to overthrow the government of Mali. I smell le rat from the Elysee in Mali today.
Turn you off. All right, let's go back to reading. It is also remarked by Europe, France, Ultramar, that about 50% of Africa's mining production remains in the country of origin as wages. Even the most cursory glance at the annual accounts of the mining companies refuse this claim. So they lie. They lie. They lie to their people. They lie to us, Westerners, the regular population, we think of them as bad guys, savages, poor, unfortunate. They put them in these terrible conditions, and then they tell us, oh, they keep some of the money. They keep most of the money. They keep 50% of the money, whatever. Even the most, they say, 50%. The excess of revenue over expenditure in many cases proves conclusively by its size that wages received by manual labor form by no means such an exaggerated proportion of value produced as 50%. The considerable sums which go in highly paid salaries to European staffs in the skilled and administrative categories. See, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I think Africa needs to do, but not from companies, but from people that have heritage, African heritage, that have never been to Africa, that have gained an education in the Western education system, that have the experience of these, to be able to function some of these machines, and the engineers and the managers and whatever, to hire these people that want to migrate to Africa, build a life there, and be employees of the African companies that are part of the maybe the African government either makes some of these industries government owned, or maybe partially government owned, but you can bring in human resources, especially now where a lot of these countries are not paying their employees, right? They're basically just stealing our labor resources, and we're the no matter our education, the distance between us and the most richest people, or just our bosses, actually the CEOs, is just ghastly. It's just huge. So you instead build an incentive program to bring these people in, and build schools to make this workforce educate your people so that they can man these things eventually as well. But yes, so that I'm saying the opposite of this. These countries send their own employees that pay taxes to France to work and live in Africa for their own benefits in this whole little extortion exploitative system. But if they are able to then bring the labor to actual Africa, who then pay their income taxes to the African countries because they're actual residents there, then it's a different story. Okay, so where was I actually? Paid salaries to European staffs in the skilled and administrative categories, part of which is returned to their own countries, must in many instances amount to the total received by African labor, to say nothing of the large amounts which swell the yearly incomes of wealthy directors who reside in the metropolitan cities of the West. The assumption also ignores another important fact, namely the wages of the manual workers, low as they are partly spent on goods manufactured abroad and imported, taking out the primary producing countries a good part of the workers' wages. In many cases, the imported goods are the products of the companies associated with the mining groups. Frequently, they are sold in the company's own stores, on the mining compounds, or by their appointed agents, the workers having to pay prices fixed by the companies. So we're going back to the same problem. The poverty of the people of Africa is demonstrated by the simple fact that their income per capita is among the lowest in the world. Yikes. And then here we're seeing what that actually is. Under $80, $81 to $125. What is this? Income per capita US 1960, 1963. over 400. South Africa only. Algeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Gabon, Ghana, Mauritius, Senegal, Southwest Africa, Zambia, Rhodesia. Okay. Yeah. In some countries, for example, Gabon and Zambia, up to half the domestic product is paid to. I mean, these numbers are old. This is because this was published in 1967 or 65, and so these numbers are just a few years after. But I kind of doubt that this has changed much, to be completely honest. But I don't actually know. Okay, so in some countries, for example, Gabon and Zambia, up to half the domestic product is paid to resident expatriates and to overseas firms who owned the plantations and mines. In Guinea-Bissau, Angola, Libya, Swaziland, Southwest Africa, Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, foreign firm profits and settler or expatriate incomes exceed 1/3 of the domestic product. Algeria, Congo, and Kenya were in this group before independence. So we could at least see the benefits of independence. These were Algeria, Congo, and Kenya. The Congo is suffering its own thing right now. On achieving independence, almost every new state of Africa has developed plans for industrialization and rounded economic growth in order to improve productive capacity and thereby raise the standard of living of its people. But while Africa remains divided, progress is bound to be painfully slow. Economic development is dependent not only on the availability of natural resources and the size and population of a country, but on economic size, which takes into account both population and income per capita. In many African states, the population and per capita products are extremely small, given an economic unit no longer than a medium-sized firm in a Western capital country, or a single state enterprise in a European socialist economy. What did I just read? This is insane. In many African states, the population per capita products are extremely small, given the economic unit no longer than a medium-sized firm in a Western capitalist. So these are really, really tiny countries. This is insanity. Why are they countries? This is that whole divide and conquer. Imagine that they have a specific resource. Jesus Christ, this is insane. I mean, I guess it makes sense. Africa is having to pay a huge price once more for the historical accident that this vast and compact continent brought fabulous profits to Western capitalism. First out of the trade in is people, and then out of imperialist exploitation. This enrichment of one side of the world out of the exploitation of the other has left the African economy without the means to industrialize. At the time when Europe passed into its industrial revolution, there was a considerably narrower gap in development between the continents, but with every step in the evolution of productive methods and the increased profits drawn from the more and more shrewd investment in manufacturing equipment and base metal production, the gap widened by leaps and bounds. This is insane. This is insane. This is crazy. I mean, we have been growing up, this is kind of less and less these days, but we grew up with seeing poor African children just like starving and, not having medical assistance. I mean, there's even stories about like the AIDS pandemic, the HIV pandemic being something that we, the Western world, caused through, vaccinations. That's something that's out there now. So like we've basically, all these miniature wars, the coups and all this stuff, been having this televised, to us growing up, thinking this country is so poor, they cannot govern themselves, they don't have education, oh my God, it's so sad, da 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 da. When in reality, all along, it was us that was doing this to them. And we continue to do it to them. We're doing that to them. If they were able to do business as any other country should be able to, then they wouldn't have this poverty. So we've been doing that to them the entire time. And, I am obviously Dominican, African descent, but I'm from the island several hundred years. I can trace back. So like we're, just like African Americans, we know that we have a lineage because of history. But we're from the Western world. I mean, I actually was born in Dominican Republic, so I'm from the Caribbean, but I grew up in the U.S., so I'm an American, and I kind of, this is the education system and the reality that I grew up with, the propaganda, really, that I grew up with. So, yeah, it's insane. It's insane. Just a bunch of lies. Okay, let's see. Do we have any other video? This is Mali. We just kind of went over it. Let's go to Mali and then let's go to the fashion. Being Dominican, I kind of want to tap into
Maliens, mes chers compatriotes, je m'adresse à vous en ce moment d'extrême gravité que traverse notre pays suite à des attaques terroristes survenues le 25 avril 2026. Ces attaques complexes, coordonnées et simultanées, ont visé les localités de Bamako, Kati, Kona, Mopti, Gao et Kidal. Grâce à la promptitude et au professionnalisme des forces armées et de sécurité, un violent coup d'arrêt a été donné aux assaillants, dont l'objectif était d'installer un climat de violence généralisée dans les localités concernées. Grâce au sang-froid des hommes engagés et au maintien de la cohérence de la chaîne de commandement, le plan funeste de l'ennemi a été déjoué. À l'heure où je vous parle, le dispositif est renforcé, la situation est maîtrisée et les opérations de ratissage, de recherche, d'exploitation du renseignement et de sécurisation se poursuivent. Maliennes, Maliens, en ces instants de douleur collective, ma première pensée va aux victimes et à leurs familles. Je m'incline devant la mémoire de nos compatriotes civils et militaires tombés sous les coups de la barbarie. J'adresse au nom de la nation tout entière mes condoléances les plus attristées aux familles endeuillées et exprime ma compassion aux blessés. Mes chers compatriotes, ces attaques ne sont pas des faits isolés, elles s'inscrivent dans un vaste plan de déstabilisation conçu et exécuté par les groupes armés terroristes et les sponsors internes et externes qui leur fournissent du renseignement et des moyens.
He is calling them out. He is calling this motherfucker out. Yikes. Is this coordinated attack? Resources that they needed to do that? Information that they needed to do that? It makes sense. I wonder if he has any additional proof. But I don't need it. I don't need the proof. I'm very convinced. We're reading this. We're reading this happening right now. It's basically, it's been happening. There's evidence. There's this strategy. These people need to continue. I mean, we saw the list of how much phosphorus, for example, France gets from Africa, 100%, you know, and all the other minerals that they get from Africa. And these countries are kicking them out, nationalizing their resources, and now they have to pay more. That's going to cause the French industry to face certain levels of pain. And yeah, they would do anything to prevent that, especially to stay in power, for example, for Macron. But I imagine for the government as a whole to keep their society kept, you know, their comfort level kept in the same level, I guess.
Logistique. Notre peuple a fait un choix, celui de la souveraineté et de la dignité qui symbolise la prise en main de son destin. Ce choix est l'expression d'une volonté nationale affirmée et assumée. Il a un prix et nous en sommes conscients. Bien que dur par sa nature, ce choix est le seul chemin qui vaille si nous voulons offrir à nos enfants un avenir libre, juste et prospère.
I think this has likes. I did like this. Yeah. Okay, so pre-colonial African hairstyle. Did we need to say anything else of that? No, we already kind of know. Pre-colonial African hairstyles. Let's go through it. Let's see. Get some African pride up in here. Yes, this is like the lady that was telling us a story earlier. Yeah, okay. This is a brave one. This one's actually kind of cool. I can get an afro. It's, my hair is not straight, obviously. Well, I mean, I guess it's not obvious, but I straighten it. But I have like some Brazilian chemical thing that takes a long time to wash out, so I can't get an afro anytime soon. Yo. This is like a crown. You have to be a queen to be able to like wear this, because you will be distracting everybody behind you. If you go to the movie theater, you have to sit in the back. It's just like, I get it, heritage and all, but like people want to see. They want to see the screen. Yo, this one's weird. This is like a horn. That's kind of cool. You're, you know, going back to your animal instincts, I guess. Okay, we're going back to the bally stuff. This one's kind of cool. Cone head. Okay. This is a cone head one. This one again, you know, this one a little bit more because it kind of goes small at the top. So like you can, you know, you have a little bit more of a viewpoint. So you can kind of get away with not being in the back, though I would still recommend it in the movie theater. This one's cool. This one's actually really, really cool. Yeah. Oh, this one you definitely can see. This one's better. You can sit in the middle of the movie theater or in the front. It doesn't matter because it's thin, you know? So you can easily see from one side to another. Your vision won't be perfect, but, you know, you can't ask for everything. This one's interesting. Okay, this one's very interesting. I don't know about that one. Okay, I like this one. This is back to the animal stuff. It's the horns. Yeah. Okay. Kind of cone head again. Yeah. Kind of like more like alien or whatever. Kind of like that though. This one's actually cool. It's fancy. Okay, I like this one too. All right, this one's a little bit like, you know, people are going to say you're a devil or something. I don't know. Yeah, back to the animal stuff. I think I like the horns better. This is cool. I like this one. This one's actually really cool. This is kind of royalty as well. You can't sit in the front or in the middle of the movie theater, but I like it. I'm not a fan of the cones for some reason. I do see that they're royalty type hairstyles. This is fucking insane. I love this. This is really cool. This is like a hat, like a comrade hat. You know what I'm saying? Don't know about that one. All right, let's go ahead and like it. All right, we have some more. Let's do a little bit more reading and then we'll end for today. Let's see how far we get. The report of the UN Economic Commission for Africa, published in December 1962 under the title of Industrial Growth in Africa, states that the gap between the continents separated by the Mediterranean has widened faster during the 20th century than ever before. True per capita output has increased in Africa, particularly in the last 2 decades, which have seen an increase of some 10 to 20%, already far ahead. The industrial countries have marked a per capita advance in the same period of 60%, and their per capita industrial production may be estimated as high as 25 times that in Africa as a whole. The difference for the greater part of Africa, however, is even more marked, since industry on this continent tends to be concentrated in small areas in the north and south. A real transformation of the African economy would mean not only doubling agriculture output, but increasing industrial output some 25 times. The report makes plain that industry rather than agriculture is the means by which rapid improvement in Africa living standards is possible. All right, we're going to stop here for today. And yeah, so basically, I'll do a little summary for next time so that when we start reading, that we know what we read today so that we're caught up. I'll try to summarize the first days and just make it into like one sentence or something, and then give a little bit more oomph to this one to kind of refresh. And that's how we'll do it moving forward. My goal is to do 2 hours per day. If you pop in anytime, give me suggestions on like how to improve things. Again, I'm just starting this out. I want to make sure that I am committed to doing this. If you watch the stream after I'm done, if there's a way, I still don't even know how to use all of this, but if there's a way to just send me a message and just give me some tips or whatever you want to, so that I can improve this production and not make it maybe so boring if you think the reading portion is boring. But I mean, the whole point is to read. So that is the whole point of it. Let's go ahead and just mark. Yeah, there we go. Now we know where we left off. But yeah, so the whole point is to read. So, if you prefer more reading and less clips and that sort of thing, then you can let me know that. If you prefer my reading, sometimes it'll improve with time, but I think it's because I'm getting distracted because I'm reading for people and I'm doing the stream and all this stuff, and I'm thinking about, but right now I only have me. I'm watching the stream. I had a few people that popped in the beginning of the stream and gave me some advice of I guess buying viewers. I don't know. I'll look into it and see if there's anything legit, but I feel like this material is very unique. Not everybody's going to like it, and especially since it's a book and we have to kind of do it together from beginning to end. But again, I will be giving summaries, points of what we've learned in the beginning of each stream, and then we can continue to read. So you will get some information. I think I'll just do like fact bullet points of what we've learned from the beginning to the end. And these fact bullet points might just continue to get longer and longer as we continue to read. And then at the end, we'll just have a big list of the things that we've learned. I think that's what I'll do. So that way if people come in and drop in, later on get to know me a little bit after I've been on air for a while. We'll be doing other books as well, of course. Then people can know what we've gained so far. All right. Well, I'm here every day from 2:30 till the goal is to 2:30 to 4:30 every day. I'm probably going to get like maybe Sunday off. I don't know. This is my second day, so I'll be here regularly every day. You can catch me, drop in, say hi. Yeah. So talk to you guys tomorrow.